Imagine waking up tomorrow with a brain that wanted exactly the same thing your future self wants. Going to the gym would feel exciting. Studying would be addictive. Starting that business would seem obvious. But that's not what happens. Instead, your brain suddenly becomes fascinated by cleaning your desk, checking the weather, watching just one video, or wondering if maybe today should be a mental health day. Here's the strange part. This isn't laziness, it isn't lack of discipline, and it definitely isn't because you're broken. Something inside your brain is quietly running a completely different mission. A mission that has almost nothing to do with success and everything to do with survival. Which raises a strange question. What if your biggest obstacle isn't your habits, but the operating system making those habits? Today, we're investigating one of the oldest conspiracies ever committed against human ambition. And the suspect has been living inside your head since the day you were born.
Every investigation starts with the crime scene. So let's observe the evidence. You promise yourself you'll begin after breakfast. Breakfast becomes lunch. Lunch becomes, I'll start fresh tomorrow. Tomorrow quietly disappears into next Monday. Interesting, because the same brain that refuses to write one page can spend 3 hours researching the perfect productivity app. It's like hiring an architect to design a gym instead of actually lifting a single weight. The strange part isn't procrastination. The strange part is how creative it becomes. Your brain suddenly develops Oscar-worthy arguments. You'll work better after coffee. You need the perfect playlist. You should organize your notes first. If excuses earned salaries, your brain would already own beachfront property. Notice something? Every excuse sounds reasonable. None of them sound like fear. Because fear almost never introduces itself as fear. It arrives wearing much nicer clothes. Preparation, planning, optimization, waiting for inspiration. Your brain doesn't shout, "Don't grow!" It whispers, "Maybe later." And somehow, later keeps winning. But why? Why would the organ responsible for intelligence behave like a lawyer defending comfort at every opportunity? That's where this case gets weird. Because comfort may not be the goal. It may simply be the disguise. So let's stop blaming ourselves and interrogate the real suspect. Imagine your brain as the world's oldest bodyguard. Its performance review has only one question. Did the humans survive today? Not, did they become successful? Not, did they become extraordinary? Just, did they stay alive? And from that perspective, growth looks surprisingly suspicious. Every new skill, every unfamiliar place, every difficult conversation, every ambitious dream looks exactly like uncertainty. And uncertainty has always carried one dangerous possibility: risk. Thousands of years ago, walking into the unknown could genuinely get you killed. Unknown forests, unknown tribes, unknown food, unknown sounds. Your ancestors who constantly experimented often didn't become ancestors. The cautious ones did. So your brain became incredibly efficient at one thing: predicting safety. Not happiness, safety. Which explains something fascinating. Comfort doesn't actually feel good because it's amazing.
It feels good because your brain stops scanning for danger. Relief gets mistaken for pleasure. That's a very expensive misunderstanding. It's like celebrating because the fire alarm finally stopped screaming instead of noticing the building was never on fire. Suddenly, comfort doesn't look innocent anymore. It starts looking like camouflage. But here's the mystery that changes everything. If your brain is trying to protect you, why does staying comfortable slowly make life smaller? That's where our investigation takes an unexpected turn.
Everything we've discovered so far points to one unsettling conclusion. Your brain isn't sabotaging your future. It's protecting your past. But if that's true, can you actually convince millions of years of evolution to work for you instead of against you? Or is growth destined to feel uncomfortable forever? That's where the real experiment begins.
Every good investigation reaches a moment where the evidence no longer fits the obvious explanation. At first, we blamed laziness. Then, we questioned motivation. Now both suspects have airtight alibis. So let's consider a different possibility. What if your brain isn't resisting effort? What if it's resisting prediction errors? Think about your favorite coffee shop. You probably don't analyze where to stand, which hand opens the door, where the menu is. Your brain has already built a shortcut. It spends almost no energy there. Now imagine walking into a completely unfamiliar airport. Suddenly, every sign matters. Every decision feels heavier. Nothing dangerous has happened, but your brain is working overtime because it can't predict what's coming next. Growth works the same way. Learning a language, starting a business, having an uncomfortable conversation. They're not difficult because they're impossible. They're difficult because your brain hasn't compressed them into a pattern yet.
Here's the fascinating part. Your brain is obsessed with efficiency. It would rather repeat an average solution 1,000 times than invent a better one once. It's like hiring the world's smartest GPS, only to discover it refuses to drive on roads built after 1998. Not because they're bad, because they're unfamiliar. And unfamiliar roads make prediction expensive. Which leads us to a strange question. If your brain worships familiarity, how does anyone ever change? Surely evolution didn't accidentally create a system that traps us forever. There has to be a loophole. And there is. But it's almost the opposite of what motivational speakers have been selling for decades.
So here's the experiment. Forget motivation. Forget discipline. Forget becoming a different person. Instead, let's negotiate with the bodyguard. Imagine trying to move a sleeping cat off your keyboard. You could shove it. It will resist. Or you could gently slide the keyboard. The cat barely notices. Most people attack change like the first option. I'm waking up at 5 a.m. I'm quitting sugar forever. I'm transforming my life this Monday. Your brain hears one thing. Emergency. The alarms go off. Comfort deploys reinforcements. Suddenly you're craving pizza while watching videos called How Successful People Wake Up at 4:30 a.m. Your brain deserves an award for creative sabotage. But tiny changes? Those are different. Ridiculously different.
One push-up, one paragraph, 5 minutes, one uncomfortable email. These changes are so small. The bodyguard doesn't even bother standing up because they don't look like threats. They look like rounding errors. And something remarkable happens. Repetition slowly teaches your brain a new prediction.
This didn't kill us. Again. This didn't kill us.
Again. This seems normal now. Without realizing it, your comfort zone quietly expands. Not because you defeated fear, because your brain quietly updated its map. That's the loophole. Growth doesn't happen when courage defeats fear. Growth happens when familiarity quietly replaces uncertainty. And once you see that, an uncomfortable question appears. What if everything you've ever called confidence was simply something your brain had practiced long enough to stop fearing? At this point, the case seems solved. Your brain isn't your enemy. It's simply outdated, an ancient security system trying to protect a modern human. But every investigation has a moment when the biggest assumption collapses. Because there's one question we still haven't answered. If the brain learns through repetition, why do some people repeat the same mistakes for decades without ever becoming free? That's where the investigation takes its biggest turn. Because the real villain was never comfort, and it was never fear. It was something hiding underneath both of them. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let's return to the evidence. We've questioned motivation. We've interrogated comfort. We've even uncovered the ancient bodyguard living inside your mind. Case closed. Or so it seemed. Because every good investigation has one final witness. The one nobody thought to interview. Memory. Here's something strange. Your brain doesn't store experiences like a camera. It stores predictions. Every success, every embarrassment, every rejection, every tiny victory gets compressed into one silent question. What should I expect next time? That's why one awkward presentation in high school can quietly influence meetings 20 years later. Not because your brain enjoys suffering, because it's running outdated software built from limited evidence. Imagine a weather app that predicted tomorrow's forecast using only one rainy afternoon from 2011. Ridiculous, right? Yet that's exactly how many of our fears operate.
One failure becomes, I'm not good at this. One rejection becomes, people like me don't belong there. One difficult beginning becomes, maybe I'm just not the type of person who succeeds. Notice the trick? Your brain quietly transforms events into identities. Not, I failed, but I'm a failure. Not, this conversation was uncomfortable, but I'm awkward. That's the real bug. Because identities are incredibly efficient. Once your brain labels you, it stops investigating. The detective goes home. The case is considered solved. And from that moment on, your brain begins collecting evidence to prove itself right. Not because it loves the truth, because it loves consistency. Which means the greatest obstacle to growth isn't fear, it's certainty. And certainty can become the most comfortable prison ever built.
So, what have we actually discovered? Not that your brain is broken, not that comfort is evil, and certainly not that successful people are fearless. We've uncovered something much stranger. Your brain is constantly asking one invisible question. Is this who we are now? Every action answers it. Not your intentions, not your goals, not your vision board. Your actions.
each tiny decision becomes a vote. Not for the future, but for your identity. Skip one workout, your brain takes notes. Finish one workout, it also takes notes. Read one page. Make one phone call. Write one paragraph. Have one uncomfortable conversation. They're all whispers to the detective inside your head. And eventually, those whispers become evidence.
Then evidence becomes identity. Then identity quietly becomes destiny, which means something extraordinary. You don't become confident and then act. You act until confidence becomes the simplest explanation your brain can find. That's why growth always feels uncomfortable, right before it starts feeling obvious. Because the map isn't changing. The map maker is. Maybe that's the greatest misunderstanding about personal growth. People spend years trying to change their lives, when all along, their brain has simply been waiting for enough evidence to believe they're already someone different. So perhaps the real question was never, how do I become fearless? Maybe the better question is, what tiny piece of evidence can I give my brain today? Because tomorrow's identity is already being written by whatever you choose next. Before you leave, I'd like you to try a small experiment. Not tomorrow, not next Monday, today. Choose one action so small, your brain won't even bother arguing with it. One sentence, one push-up, 1 minute. Then come back to this video in a week and ask yourself a different question. Not, did my life change? Ask, what new evidence did I give my brain about who I am? Because that's where every transformation begins. Not with a burst of motivation, but with a tiny clue left behind for the detective living inside your mind. If this investigation changed the way you see yourself, subscribe. Not because you need more motivation, but because we're uncovering more hidden bugs in the human operating system. And if someone you care about keeps blaming themselves for lacking discipline, send them this video. It might help them realize they've been solving the wrong mystery all along. Because the most dangerous bugs are the ones that feel perfectly normal. See you in the next investigation.